Hotel family, Aquaba. Welcome to lesson number 3, Mdw Ntr, the world's oldest mathematical language. I'm calling it mathematical language because it is a language based on truth. And I will explain that in future lessons. But just like mathematics is based on truth, the language of Mdw Ntr is based on identifying what's true. So my main point here is that if you are the child of God and God is a part of you, then in your imagination, God's supposed to look like you. And when you accept a picture of the deity assigned to you by another people, you become the spiritual prisoners of that other people. That's a quote from Dr. John Henry Clarke, uh, one of our ancestors and elders who shared a lot of information. And much respected by the African community. So Africans living along the Nile Valley looked at their women and identified them as the images of God. And they used the term Neteret to talk about this idea. In lesson 1, the Neteret that we learned about was Neteret Ma'at, who is distinguished by the ostrich feather, the ostrich plume in her headband. In lesson 3, we are going to focus on Neteret Aset. And Aset is distinguished by the Neteret, or the female, that has the seat of power, the throne on her head. There's several words that include Aset in them. On the left, we have just ST, or the transliteration ST, we would say set, which is basically the enclosure for set again. And then we have ma set. So we have the stern of the ship, the throne and the loaf of bread, and a leg. Uh, that's translated as lap. But again, what we see is we see the stern of the ship, which is ma, and we have set. So, and we know Ma represents truth from lesson 1. Then we have the twisted flax, which is transliterated with the letter H, and loaf of bread with the thrones in the symbol, and we would transliterate that HST. The branch behind that represents the physical structure, which is translated for us. So a set is translated as the actual physical seat or throne on which a set is seated right now. So in this image, we see the representation of, I'd say, a typical African woman living along the Nile Valley. And she is holding a musical instrument known as a sistrum. Uh, the words in Mdw Ntr to represent female are the doorbolt, the loaf of bread with the seated female behind. The seated female behind is the determinative. So that's just ST or SHT. Different transliterations have the doorbolt as just a plain S and some the SH. So that would be set or shet. We also have this representation of the female. Again, we have the well. I say again because we saw the well in lesson 2. So that is a well and a loaf of bread. And I talked a little bit about that in terms of the female being represented as a full well and bread. And again, this is Hemet, another representation for woman. In some cases, they say this woman represents a wife. And here we have, again, a combination of the two. So we have the doorbolt, the loaf of bread, the determinative for the woman, female, again, and then we have the well, the loaf of bread, and the determinative for woman. So this could be transliterated ST HMT or SHT, HMT. And again, this is translated as woman. So depending on how we want to talk about this, could be the female wife, which is kind of redundant. Below that, we have the symbol, the name of the symbol that this female is holding. It's again, the transliteration is the Dobalt, which is SH. And then we have the two pools of water, which is again another SH, and then the loaf of bread, which is T. So I guess that could be like chachette. It sounds kind of makes a sound, I guess, of the instrument. So here are some three other African women, each of them holding a musical instrument. From right to left, we have what looks like a harp, and then we have something that looks like a string guitar type instrument, and then we have someone blowing what would look like a flute of some sort. And what we can see, or I should say, what we would do if we were trying to transliterate this, we would have the SHT or ST, and then the YW would indicate the plurality that there is, in this case, three. So as time moved on, the image of the African woman with the child seated on her lap uh, started to look like this. This is from the 12th through the 15th century. This is a representation of what's identified as Virgin Mary holding the child Jesus. So looking at these three panels on the far left, we see a Sut Mut holding the Nasut Biti on her lap. I kind of know that based on the images. We could kind of see what's on the female's head. We could kind of see what's on the Nasut Biti's head. We see the Uraeus. So we know that that's an adult and not a baby. And in the center, we also see in the center image, that's about 4,000 years later. The image has changed just a good degree. We still see an adult on the lap of a female. And then if we move up again, another maybe 600, 700 years, and that image has changed. The time frames I'm not exactly sure, but I know from left to right we've gone through at least 5,000 years of change. So this is a representation of Netrut Aset and her twin sister Nebet Het. And they are surrounding the Netra Ra, who is represented in the form of Khnum. Right, lots of images involved in this, but our focus is going to be on Netrut Aset. And Netrut Nebet Het we'll focus on in lesson 4. So let's first review some of the vocabulary from lesson 1. Okay, so we have Ma'at, Sat Ra, Henet, Tepihert, Taui, and Iu Gert. So that's Ma'at, Sat Ra, Henet, Tepihert, Taui, and Iu Gert. And we recognize Ma'at again as the African woman who has the feather in her headband. So here's the image of a African woman who's immortal. She is not a Netrette, and we'll identify who she is, or we did identify who she is when we did lesson number 2. So this is basically a review of lesson number 2. We will be reading from right to left. down each column, starting on the right. And we have Aser, which is interestingly represented by the all-seeing eye, the seat of Aset, and the Netr seated behind that throne. And below that we have Sut-Hempt. Sut-Hempt tells me that she is the wife. In Uert, again, this is the comrade in the loaf of bread, tells me she is the great wife. Nebet, female lord. Taui, of the two lands. We saw Taui in lesson 1 represented slightly differently, but it represents the same idea, the two lands, upper and lower Nile Valley. And then we have her name inside of the Shinu, and her name is Nefertari, Mut, and Merit. Probably translated as the beautiful one loved by Netret Mut. And then the next column, we have Ma'a, Karu. Ma'a is true, Karu is voice. So we have true voice, Usir. Don't try to translate this too often. So maybe if we did something online, I would talk a little bit more about that. And then in the last column, we have Netr, and Netr, we have the symbol for Netr, we have the column, and below that we have the arm and the hand, and at the very bottom we have the book row. Also in this image, I pointed out in one class that Nefertari, Mut, and Merit seems to be playing a game on what's identified as a min board, which is where we get the transliteration MN in names like Amen. All right, so let's work on the vocabulary for lesson 3. Again, these worksheets are attached to the link in YouTube. So if you don't really need the worksheet, you can just do this online paper. But moving right along. So we start off with what's identified as a throne with a loaf of bread and an egg. And we transliterate that as AST, and it is the name of the Netret Aset. It is her name. Usually we see her seated behind, but we don't have to see her seated behind there. We know that that's Aset. And then the next 4 symbols are a folded tent, and that's transliterated with the letter ZA. The key to immortality, a key to everlasting life, as some would say. We transliterate that ANKH and say Ankh. Then we have the Jed column, which is the column on the building, just like the columns on the any buildings that we see in government. Transliterated DJD. And last we have the scepter, which is transliterated with the letters WAS. It is an animal's head on some sort of a stick with open ends at the bottom. So the next set of symbols, begin with um, the folded cloth, the ripple of water, a leg and a foot, and a scroll. The folded cloth is often replaced with the door bolt or vice versa. Sometimes you'll see the door bolt, sometimes you see the folded cloth. Uh, when it's a folded cloth, we usually just have, or usually just see it written with an S. And so we have S and B, Seneb. Then we have the basket. We've seen a basket before. That's Neb. And we have a clump of papyrus. The door bolt actually should be up there in that space. The door bolt actually helps recognize the transliteration being MHS, the door bolt representing the S. Again, that S could be SH, but I guess because of the structure, they use a door bolt as opposed to the folded cloth. And then at the bottom would just be the basket by itself. Sometimes I fill in the basket, I shade in the basket. In this case, I didn't, and that is Neb again. So the final set of Mdw Ntr symbols for this lesson begin with the stool and the uchik, or the quail chick. And the stool is P, the quail chick or the uchik is W, so that would give us poo. And below that we have a fancy piece of bread on a plate. And we have more bread and we have a stool. We transliterate that as Hotep. And again, well, I shouldn't say again, but the loaf of bread and the stew are the T and the P. So the plate with the bread on it is HTP by itself. The bread with the stew are the phonetic complements. Then we have this symbol, which is represented as half or the side of something, and it's transliterated with the letter M. Then we have the owl. The owl is also transliterated with the letter M. And we have the mouth and the arm and hand. The mouth is R, and the arm and hand is the transliterated with the letter A, so we get Ra for that. So now we can put all of our vocabulary together and do a transliteration of this image. We could start with starting at the top, from right to left. We see to the right of the solar disk, above the head of Khnum, we have the seated Ntr with the solar disk and the is what it is in front of it, and that is Ra. And now we know, hopefully, that the seated throne, or the throne with the loaf of bread and the egg, that is the name of the Netret Aset, and that is her on the right-hand side. Now, behind her, we can see a set of Mdw Ntr. The first one is the folded tent, and that's protection. But usually all the rest of them come together as a group. And they would be Ankh, Jed, was, Seneb, Neb, Mehes, Neb. So we have Za, Ankh, Jed, was, Seneb, Mehes, Neb. On the left-hand side, oh, that's not good. Oh, okay, I see what I did. So in between the two Neturets and to the left and right side of Khnum, the very top, we have Ra on the right, the arm and the hand, and the seated Netur Ra. And then on the left, we have Ra again at the bottom, over the feet of Nebuchadnezzar. So whatever this sentence is telling us, it actually begins with Ra and it ends with Ra. And again, at the very top, we have Ra. So reading from in front of our set, we have Ra, Pu, Hotep, Usir, which seems to represent that Ra is offering Hotep to Usir. Now on the side where we have Nebuchadnezzar, we have Usir, Hotep, Ra. So it looks like from one side, Ra is offering Hotep to Usir, on the other side, Usir is offering Hotep to Ra. Okay, so that ends lesson 3. And this image that we see here is what I'll be working on lesson 4. You might recognize the two Neturets on here. Meanwhile, I think I will try to do something live on Zoom. And so if you're interested and you made it this far, you could just send me your email in the comments, and I'll send you a link to the Zoom lesson. It's going to be Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Shem Hotep.